When we last left off with our Belisarius Cawl, I really want to call him Crawl, I don't know why. Anyway, we had this nice white or off-white robe that I needed to add something to. This was a special figure character, so need to do something with it. I was going to do some freehand, couldn't decide what to do, and then I realized, wait a minute, I still have a bunch of gear decals left over from the Imperial Knight Cordoba project, so I'm going to use them. The problem being, I have a robe here with a whole bunch of folds and holes in it and other little nasty things that decals do not want to play well with, but I managed to work it out. All you have to do is, well, pray a lot, but you can use decals on surfaces that are not the best. This is a good example where you can use decals. You can't put them everywhere, but I have large folds here, and after a lot of cajoling and cutting very small amounts of decal at a time, putting on small sections, and a lot of cursing and pushing in with the brush and slowly stretching out the decal, drying it off and reapplying it as necessary, finally managed to get them placed. Some areas can't place the decals. Anything that comes to a point, like where his knee sticks out, because that's going to cause the decal to fold over itself in more than two directions. So, but these areas I can do it. I didn't place the decals all over the entire figure. What I wanted to do was have a look a bit more, kind of like a Chinese dress where they have a floral pattern, but it's not a repeating floral pattern. It's kind of like a branch that goes up the dress. So concentrate on the smaller areas, use small decals, and eventually it'll work. After allowing the decals to dry for about an hour, now I have to attack them with several coats of micro scales, micro sol. There's two parts in this process. They make micro set, which replaces the water that you normally put down before applying the decals, and micro sol that you use afterwards. I don't put too much weight with micro set. It doesn't seem to do a whole lot for me. Micro sol is a different story. Once the decal is dry, you can apply this repeatedly and work it between any little bubbles, any little parts that are folded off, and it will help shrink the decal down and keep it in place. So I had to do this about 4 or 5 times. After the sol was set and decals finished with, we have a little bit of a problem now, because I just put this decal pattern over all the robe areas, and that includes the areas that were highlighted and the areas that were shaded, but the decals are not highlighted and shaded, so we got to go back now and lighten and darken them up a little bit. First, starting off with the lighting, going back to our original main color pale sand that we used on the robes, very, very thin, and I'm just very carefully, very slowly building up a little bit of color on the highlight areas, the edging areas, just to lighten the decals a little bit. So this paint is extremely thin, and I'm just working very slowly, because if I highlight too much, the decal is going to disappear. I don't want to do that. I just want to put some very light, transparent layers over them. And then for the shade, going back to the color that I used for the shade on the robe, which was Vallejo Model Color Flat Earth. Again, very thin, just kind of working it in once again to the recesses, trying to darken those decals a little bit. Once again, don't want to completely obscure them, just want to tint them a little bit darker. Now for the armor trim. I already washed these areas with that dark turquoise black wash, so that's going to make this step a little bit easier. Going with a deep copper or bronze color here, starting off with Vallejo Model Air Rust. Very carefully applying that around all the trim, and also some of the other areas on the model, because right now all the metallics we still have that original silver color, and it's way too prominent on the model. We got to break that color up a little bit with our warmer brown metallic. Next, we highlight the rust with some Vallejo Game Color Glorious Gold, and I've mixed some Flow Aid in with it because recently found mixing some Flow Aid in the metallics really helps them, well, flow a whole lot better. Since metallic paints have a solid material in them, they tend to get really clumpy. The Flow Aid actually slows down the drying time, so they flow a lot better from the brush. Really helped out doing these small, intricate areas. Some of the areas, not all of the areas that we just painted with our rust gold, need a little bit of shade. Not the trim around the big armor plates, but like the flat of the axe and some other areas. For that, I'm using the exact same color I used to wash the silver metal, which is black and brown ink, but I'm just reversing the quantity of the ink. So this one has a lot more brown in it because we're going over a brown metallic and a little bit of black. And now, here comes the torture, at least for me, painting all the wires and all the tubing. Because in my army scheme, I decided to paint all of it like a old-fashioned printer cable, ribbon cable, where everything's a different color. I had to paint all these damn wires red and green and blue and yellow and orange and all sorts of things, and there's so many of them. I'm not recording every single one. Trust me, I painted them a whole different colors, and then some of them I even went back to and changed the colors because it wasn't matching. The colors actually make sense in a way. Like I don't want to have a whole bunch of red on one side and none on the other. Try to keep at least light blue colors away from the armor carapace. Try to use those colors on other areas of the model. So there is actually a rhyme and reason to what looks like just a cacophony of colors altogether. But it did take a long time. It was the most frustrating part on this model. I don't go too well into glowing bits, but there are a few, I don't know, generator looking things on this model I decided to pick out a little bit better. I originally actually painted them blue and realized it was too close to the color of the carapace, so I went back with Vallejo Game Color Jade Green and repainted them, and then highlighted some of them with a little bit of white. The recessed areas in the metal that we already painted, there's no real way to paint that without messing up the metal. So some of the metallics had to be repainted. That's totally fine if you have to do something like that to get color in a deep recess. Going through with another clean coat of metallic just on a few spots, that's a small price to pay, rather than leaving those areas looking dark and just looking unpainted and unimaginative. There is exactly one single bit of exposed flesh on this model, and that is one singular left arm. And normally you figure a slightly undead creature, as he is here, or at least kept alive with machinery, you figure that would be pale and pasty looking. But because I used whites on the robe, I decided to go with a different direction. I went with dark colors, more like a look of a mummy. So I'm using a mix of Vallejo Model Color, what did I use? Hang on, it's coming to me. German Gray and Brown Violet, that's what I used. So we're starting off very dark to just first undercoat our limb. And then for the base coat, going a little odd here, I'm just kind of making colors up as I go along. I went with Vallejo Model Color German Field Gray, considering the first two colors is our deep dark recess color, so we can go a little bit different with this one. And it just seemed to have a nice gray tone, slightly sickly green gray tone that I was looking for. And then to highlight, I've added Vallejo Game Color Khaki. I don't want to go with white or something like that because of the tone of the field gray. It would come out too pale blue-ish. So keeping it khaki is a bit closer to human flesh color, so it will highlight it without turning it pale or making it actually lose color. While the model right now looks like we're pretty much done with it, it's actually closer to only being about half done, because now here's where the tedium really sets in. I have to go in and start adding details here and there, because remember, we still have the original silver overcoat over all the metal, and I need to break that up a little bit. So I'm going back with the rust and the gold to add that color in a few more places. Some other metal areas, I'm giving them a slightly blue wash. Some might need a little bit darker wash here and there. I keep finding wires that I missed, or I decided it'll look better if it's a different color. Realizing, oh, this is not a wire, this is supposed to be a metal bit. So lots of little annoying tidbits going on right now. And then we also have to go back to our original silver color that we started off with, because once again, after painting everything, I finally established where I want the color, so now I have to go back to that original silver and in a few areas clean it up, add a few extra highlights now that I know that it's going to remain a silver or a steel color. Some areas where I want it to stand out a bit more, I'll paint that entire area silver so it pops against a darker color that's underneath it. Things like bolts or plates that are already on that gray metallic color. So again, lots of little tidbits still going on here. And after 100 little tiny bits and bobs, we are finally done. Well, I should say at least done for the moment, because I know I'm going to be going back to this and fixing things as time goes on, because every time I take a look at it, I'm going to find something that I missed. Just because there's so many little rivets, so many little wires, bits and bobs here and there, and also a lot of things that I couldn't really reach that well because I decided to assemble before paint. But I think we're done enough for now, at least. Yeah, very time-consuming project for a big figure like this. It's not that it's just big, it's complex. There's just literally so many parts, and they all have a different purpose, or need to be a different, or should be, at least I want them, a different color. So this was rather time-consuming, took many hours, and took 3 cameras to complete. But this is it for the ad mech. I hope I'll be painting more in the future if GW actually gets off their butt and gives them transports and makes them a bit more viable. But yeah, that's going to be a long time down the road, I'm sure. So in a few years, you can welcome back the ad mechs, hopefully. Till then, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.